I'm wearing two hats today. It's always a little ambiguous for me which hat I'm wearing, but the work I do is through the Sustainable Ireland Cooperative, and we've been engaging citizens for over 20 years now, and I want to tell you that story a little. And also I'm wearing my hat of Sustainable Projects Ireland, the educational charity that was funded in 1999 that's developing the EcoVillage, and I'm also going to tell that story as we go through. So I have a number of points I want to make. I really have just a bit of background that we've been at this a long time. Strengthen community resilience. It's a frame that we use all the time, well, for the last 12 years now. I actually spoke at the Tusla National Conference a couple of weeks ago on the theme of community resilience, and it really resonates. We're starting to speak the same language from the environmental sector to the health, well-being, and all these different approaches. I want to look at the potential of Cloughjordan EcoVillage. I want to introduce it and show you the potential, especially for action research and immersive place-based learning. And I want to look ahead. What are we doing? What have we done and what are we doing? So let's get into it. 20 years ago, I held my first event when I was studying in Maynooth University. Some of you might have even been there. It was the first time that really we brought together the different actors, stakeholders of sustainability and sustainable development. We did another one in 98, another one in 99, and then published the Sustainable Ireland Source Book. It was a reader of 12 articles from leading thinkers, bringing this new sector of sustainability together, and a directory of about 500 organisations. From that, we set up the Sustainable Ireland Cooperative. That's who I work with, even though we're called Cultivate. And we went to Temple Bar after doing this book and said, we want to do a cultural festival. So we're coming to the cultural quarter of the city. We don't want to do an environmental festival. And I've spent 20 years telling people I'm not an environmentalist. I'm as interested in society, our livelihoods, our well-being as the environment. I see them all connected. And so we held a week-long festival in 2000 called Convergence, and every year we've been doing this Sustainable Living Festival. And I'm going to give you a little insight into what we did this year. But before that, just to keep the trajectory of this story, once we had done the Sustainable Earth Fair, or the Sustainable Living Fair in Temple Bar for 2 years, Temple Bar said, look, there's a big empty building, the former Viking Adventure Centre. Why don't we know that you've got some ideas for continuing to do the work you do in this week? Why don't you move in there? So for 7 years, we ran this centre, included this fantastic Essex Street West Church, St. Michael and John's, and we sort of brought together some of the leading thinkers in healthy cities, smart cities, and I'm sure many of you were there. We also prototyped moving away from this format of interaction, top-down, top table, expert at the podium, into trying to get much more engagement and studying how you would maximize the participation so that everyone can share their gifts and knowledge in this and not just be talked at for a day. And while we were in Temple Bar, we also did different projects. I was looking at a 10-part course that we had the framework for, couldn't find the funding of it. Some people said the Broadcasting Commission of Ireland are funding television and film. Why don't you repitch it as a TV show? So I pitched it as a 10-part TV show. It's been broadcast in over 10 countries now in public access and community television stations, but also the DVD is still used in community groups like transition town groups all across the world. And we created from that 10-part TV show a toolkit for leadership, livelihoods, and local resilience that had the TV shows embedded in them as an important element. We trained about 100 trainers to deliver that. We had a training handbook and a guide for the learners. From 2008 to 2011, we worked with the British Council on a Climate Champions programme. This is a European-wide programme called Challenge Europe. And I got to mentor the 15 advocates they choose every year. And so we did some learning journeys. And I really loved this idea of learning on a journey. And we really piloted it here. This is a picture of the Green Journey, where we went over and visited Eden, Totnes, and the Centre for Alternative Technology. And the participants were doing a course on the bus, but they were also making films, and they were engaging with people at every stop. And I just love the idea of that participative journey of learning. Every year for the last 11 years, we run the sustainability area at the Electric Picnic. Now, this is a challenge of engaging citizens with critical issues in an environment where I'm definitely having a good time. I'm not really here to listen to serious things. So we've learned a lot of how we approach this in Global Green. We take about 30 organisations with us, and we animate an edge of the festival. And we've really made attractive because of the conviviality. Yeah, we've got really good food, good coffee, good music, and we've started to use spoken word poets and that to communicate the message, games and activities like our Connect 4 Resilience game, and nice presentations, talks, and conversations. Really, that's what we're interested in. How do we have a conversation on topics that matter? How do we engage people in that? Two pieces of work I just want to highlight. One with Carnegie Trust in the UK again. I was a catalyst in a community of practice. It was a 2-year project looking at resilience and community resilience for the first time. Exploring community resilience in times of rapid change was the document that resulted in. And really this was bringing together community and sustainability advocates across the UK, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and in England. And then with 6 partners across Europe for 2 years with a Cornelius Fund across Europe, we did schools for resilience, using resilience and problem or place-based learning as the themes. So with place-based learning, you're connecting the students in the school to the community and to the living world around the school. So we piloted it in 2 schools. It was interesting, and we've taken a lot of that thinking of the sequence of this, because this was participative, it was engaging, it wasn't just this top-down learning, rote learning. I'm sort of telling you a story, so it just bounces along, but they all build on each other. You can see this film, there's no time to show it. It's a 7-minute animation on community resilience. It also stresses the importance of our personal resilience, our health and our well-being to be a catalyst of change. And this was a 7-minute animation. It came out of the Carnegie work. And it's really about the competencies we need to think about to navigate the transition that we're in. And it takes the skill sets of a good board rider or surfer and uses that as the metaphor. And we've used this as a conversation starter with Iski. We did a really interesting conversation with Electric Picnic, extending this metaphor of surfing the waves of change. It's a really powerful metaphor. So the whole of Cultivate, Sustainable Ireland Cooperative, after a couple of years with Eco-UNESCO, we managed the greenhouse, the former Info building. We moved to Cloughjordan. It's a big change from talking the talk in Dublin to walking the talk. I sometimes say that the EcoVillage has been the longest and most expensive self-development course I've ever taken, because you learn so much about yourself and relationship with other people. I'm going to come back to the EcoVillage, but just to in the frame of this, we also have a citizen science project. It's called GROW, the GROW Observatory. And again, it's sensing, it's using monitors in the ground. We've got 20 partners. It's led from Dundee University, includes the Met Office of the UK. And it's really trying to get citizens understanding the soil and agroecology, and then eventually doing soil tests and monitoring with simple monitors as well, to look at water moisture and to be able to validate from a citizen's database, citizens' data, to the data that's coming from the satellite. So it's looking especially at land use changes with climate change. So it's called the GROW Observatory. I'll touch on it a bit more. Also, the EcoLease is a new network of networks across Europe. One of the problems I see is the fragmented nature of all our works. We're atomized at every level, from the street to the institutions, to our local authorities, to our governments. We need to bring more cohesion. And one of the ways we're doing that across Europe with some big networks, Transition Towns, ICLEI, which is the local authority network, networks of researchers like Drift, you mentioned them earlier in Rotterdam, to really try and look at how do we accelerate this transition with local and community-led initiatives. So that brings me into Convergence that we've just finished with support from the EPA. We spent 2 weeks looking at the issue of community engagement and citizen engagement, and the Convergence was about coming together. It was about sharing ideas. One of the things we did with the environmental pillar, it's a work package in the environmental pillar, was to look at the Sustainable Development Goals and engagement, citizen engagement. So the Sustainable Development Goals, we've heard a little bit about it. This is the framework that all of our development should be using as a frame. And if we break it down and to see it more systemically, so that we have nested systems. We have the biosphere with 4 goals, we have society that nests in the biosphere with 8 goals, and we have the economy with 4 goals nested in and for the benefit of society, not this 3-legged stool model that we used to be told about in sustainable development, where we should balance the environment with the economy. I don't think so. We live in complex times. We need to see systemically. And I think even looking, sorry, Michal. Even looking at the SDGs this way, I think can help frame them. And one of the things we're doing, and I've got some postcards, is trying to show these SDGs coming alive from local stories. So we were listening as we went around the country for local stories that address more than one always, of these goals. And so we did an event as part of Convergence on citizen engagement. We brought 8 researchers, mostly funded from the EPA and from 5 different institutions. Simon was there, and we explored what different things that we have learned to change behavior, to what not to do, what to think, and we're creating a little NGO best practice guide from that. But one of the things that I got most from was our stories and conversations for a healthy and sustainable Ireland. We did it 7 times across the country, about 50 people on average, each one. They were framed slightly different. So in Carlow, they wanted a healthy, happy, and sustainable Carlow. In Galway, they were interested in a healthy and low-carbon Galway. And we had the same framework in each of these events. They were 2-hour events. They started with a conversation about what we appreciate, what we love about our community. We had 6 little stories, 4 or 5-minute stories from local people doing really interesting stuff, followed by a conversation cafe looking at what enables and what hinders community-led development. And we're currently pulling all that together to look at what we do next year with Convergence. So the EcoVillage, just quickly, is the potential for the EcoVillage for action research, participatory action research, and for immersive learning. I coordinate the education and research group in the EcoVillage. The EcoVillage started out in 1999, you might have heard of it, we're all in Dublin. And then we found Cloughjordan in 2002, we got planning permission with lots of conditions. In 2008 we started building, in 2009 the first houses were occupied, and we weathered that economic downturn, and we're still there. It is a struggle, but we're still there. There's 130 people live in the eco neighbourhood because it's connected right to the town of Cloughjordan. So there's the main street here. Here's a nice village green. Here's the entrance to the eco-village. There's 55 houses up. You can see all the spots where there's still houses to go up. And we're currently working with Cohesion, who've just finished some things in Ballymun, looking at social and affordable and co-housing, different models of housing. The eco-village is a 67-acre estate, so it's got lots of different elements in it. And it's a complex project because although Sustainable Projects Ireland, the educational charity that's holding the land, and there's about, 12 learning providers, 4 or 5 businesses, and the farm's a different entity, Cloughjordan's Art's a different entity, but we've got 55 low energy, high performance homes. It's got a greater percentage of A and B rated houses than you'd see anywhere else in the country, with a wide range of materials, ranging from like the cob and the hemp to the timber frame, well insulated passive standard. We have renewable energy, the largest community-owned renewable energy district heating system, which currently is feeding 55 houses with wood chip, but has one of the largest solar panel arrays. We've got a community-supported agriculture scheme. This is a subscription. It's a different model. Could happen anywhere, rural Ireland or urban. We're demonstrating sustainable urban drainage. We have a neighbourhood. We planted 17,000 trees, a community neighbourhood, biodiversity trail all around it. We've got an enterprise centre. I'll talk a bit more with co-working, so we're facilitating a collaborative approach about how we work. It's got a fab lab, so it's one of the only community accessible digital fabrication labs in Ireland, allowing us to prototype, repair, and thinking about new products. And we've got a lot of other things, which I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just give you a sense of what that means is we're an ecosystem of innovation. It's quite unique with all those different elements. I think we saw a slide from you, Simon, that showed it in a streetscape, all these different co-working in different spaces. But we frame ourselves as an ecosystem of innovation. And this quote from Otto Scharmer, who's an MIT professor in business, is one of my favorites because I think it gets across the biggest challenge we face, this challenge of individualistic thinking. He said the biggest transition we need to make at this time, the most important transition, is the transition from ecosystem thinking, individualistic on our own, to ecosystem thinking, which isn't just thinking about the environment, it's thinking about relationships and connection. It's a different way of operating. And if we move forward to face the challenges we face, we can't use the same logic that got us into those challenges. We need a different systemic way of thinking. So we've got lots of recognition. We won a UN-backed livable communities for being a healthy community as well as a sustainable community in China in 2013. We were recognized as an anticipatory project by a group of researchers across Europe that were looking at the most anticipatory projects that can demonstrate the transition to a low carbon and resilient society. We measured our ecological footprint, quite a rigorous test. An ecological footprint is a measure of how much land and resources we need to live our lives. The average one planet living would be about 2 global hectares. We're just above it, so we've got a lot of work to do. If we all lived like most Irish people, we'd need 3 planets. If we all lived like most Americans, we'd need 5 planets. But the idea that we would find that measure so we could ramp it down. But it's not just our ecological and relationships that is important. It's a relationship to each other and our sense of belonging in place. And really we start now almost everything with an appreciation of place, getting that sense of place. That idea of fellowship, of social capital, of starting to see the beneficial relationships between all the different elements, the different citizens, the different people in the local area, whether that's urban or rural. And we need to rethink these social relations to address in a deeper level how we relate. So it's all about relatedness. And I know now from the EcoVillage adventure that really we thought we were bringing like 20 disparate methodologies together in a living community. I thought that's what we're doing. I know now that that's so simple compared to how do we work together with different values and worldviews in a same locality. And that's a problem we face in every street, every neighbourhood, whether in Dublin or in rural Ireland. So it's about building neighbourliness. It's about building more community cohesion. And it's not just cohesion at that community level, cohesion amongst our institutions and a different way of thinking. It's about conviviality. It's about places and spaces that facilitate intergenerational activity, places where we can reconnect to nature, places and spaces where we can grow old, places we can work together. The Irish word, the mehel, is a great opportunity. It's a nice, easy entry thing to organise a mehel. Let's come out and work together. It's healthy, and we've seen from the previous presentations the advantage of that. Eating together, simple things. This is a street feast, which happens all over Ireland in July. Simple thing to do that builds social capital. And from those simple things, we can create networks and then thicken those networks into real assets like renewable energy or food systems. This is our solar panel. We own it collectively, causing us all sorts of problems. But if we had feed-in tariffs, we could have a rooftop revolution where every community building, a church hall, had solar panels, and we have that income from energy generation. Eating together, growing together. We're seeing the rise of community gardens, nice, easy environments that make the place look nice, might be able to grow food. But what's most important, I think, from this point of view, is it grows relationships. It's a place, again, where we build community. And then if you scale that up from community gardens to community-supported agriculture, we have a subscription base that's much tighter. It's like shop local on steroids. We subscribe to the farm. We employ 2 farmers. We do the same with our baker. This is Joe Fitzmaurice, one of the best bakers in Ireland. He has a real bread business with sourdough breads, but he also has a bread club. I subscribe directly to the baker. He's got that guaranteed cash flow. Before he starts baking, he knows that the community supported his business, and he sold 150 loaves already. The social enterprise and co-working, I mentioned how important that is with Fab Labs. These are new things that we can repair in the circular economy. We need to think more about repair and upcycling. And then when we see the different elements around the We Create Centre, that we could start to see an ecological an ecosystems approach to that, we start to see the potential of real sustainable communities. And this, as your slide, Simon, is very similar for an urban setting where you've got co-work spaces, or you've got Fab Labs, or you've got repair cafes, and these sort of things. This is our new amphitheatre, which the president opened this year. But this whole environment, a space for learning adventures, learning camps, learning festivals, where we do place-based learning. We get out of the institution, out of the classroom, at the lecture hall, and we can do research and education in the environment of community, not just researching on the community where we hardly see the results. So immersive education, place-based learning, participatory action research, these environments of places like EcoVillage are amazing. Also brilliant for mainstreaming sustainability. We normalize it by every weekend doing tours where it's like active retirement groups coming in or whatever. So we're prototyping the behavioral and organizational changes that are required for any community to have a lower environmental impact and be more resilient. And things like collaborative processes for meeting and learning, things like prototyping and new ways to innovate socially, new products, new startups, and also, most importantly, I think, community governance. How do we work together and make decisions together? Well, we've got a lot of experience of that. I'm not saying we've got it right all the time, but a lot of experience in how we might do that, and even using platforms across our communities to do that. So, to just finish, the President said when he visited that Cloughjordan, where the vision of sustainable living is clearly be put into practice, brings to mind the Irish saying, great achievements only come through cooperation. So the EcoVillage is a livable community. It's a fantastic place to live, but it's also an amazing destination for transformative, immersive learning, and I hope an environment where we could actually research how we make any local place more sustainable. Just to finish, I've only got a minute or two. So how might we develop the competencies, the capacity of people that are driving change in our local areas? Well, I think we need to facilitate an appreciation of place, understand the context we're in, take a systemic approach, work across sectors like we're seeing today, use asset and place-based approaches. Simon again mentioned the asset-based development, and I mentioned the place-based. Animate intrinsic values. Trillions are spent to animate extrinsic values of power, status, celebrity, and really we need intrinsic values, community, empathy, if we're going to move forward and make this transition. And whatever we do, build capacities in collaboration. It's so important. So looking forward in 2018, well, we hope to continue Convergence, looking at the stories and conversations model, going to more communities than just the 6 or 7 we did there. So that'd be Convergence 18. We're working on a toolkit for community catalysts with some of these things that we're in there. And we're looking at an installation of the Sustainable Development Goals that bring them alive with local projects that we can see ourselves stepping into those projects locally and engaging. Not a big block of platitudes that we've been told all our life, end hunger, these sort of things. So I think that we bring these global goals alive with, by showing what's going on locally in there. So that's me. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for inviting me here. It's great to be outside my bubble. Thank you.